I was given very strict instructions for this conference and tons of questions, as she said. What can we do with the state, a society, and schools teaching a vision of a marriage, of family, and sexuality that are contrary to sound anthropology? What can we do when individual rights prevail on human rights? How to obtain real family policies? What's a sound secularity? How to separate state and church, and friends who wants to defend their identity, their right, with an aggressive society expressing an expression which is contrary to ours. How to overcome the fear to express our voice? What are the steps to the creation of a family association? Under what condition does it have credibility with the government? So these are a lot of questions, and I don't pretend to bring answers to all of them, but maybe only my witness, my experience, what we tried to do in Europe. What can we do? Christians, are they condemned to be a minority idealists? To start off, I'd like to say that I'm deeply convinced, and maybe we can share this belief, that each of our lives has more importance than any evolution in society. But these evolutions in society have such an impact on each of our lives that we have to deal and cope with that. That was John Paul II in 1982. So what characterizes evolution of society today, as criticized Benedict XVI? Our societies are marked by individuality and relativism, which are the major threats in our lives. Individualism marked by consumption society. We went from satisfying our needs to satisfying our desires, which creates a lot of frustrations. And we are coming to think that we are worth through what we spend than through what we are thinking. Even today, after satisfying our desires, we manage our pulsions. And two questions unanswered. Who am I? Do I have an influence on my destiny? Each of us, and especially in France, each one is facing its failures, since you talk both languages, and I have to say that there's no translation in this word I hear, I'm nothing. I'm null. I am nothing. In France, we have an approach to failure which is terrible for everyone. So the French word is nul. I'm nothing. I'm a dummy. Given this concession and domination of marketing of things, we developed relationships on the utility basis. And at last, another feature of the society, this is a new notion of time. I talked about it a lot yesterday. And today, time is the instant. It's not a duration. A second feature of this society is relativism. Are we tired of our own history? How can the words of the last century didn't leave any footprint? One example. The family going through parents or kinship means that there's a crisis within families. And moreover, it is itself a crisis between the past and the future. This relativism is translated by the idea that everything is equal, and it leads to a secularization of behaviors, which means a crisis in the passing down or transmission. When the good behaviors that were passed down from generation to generation disappear, there's a new regulation, which is mainly legal. So where to find the standard? There's a social order where the fact is a right. So there's a breakdown. There's no coherence. What is lacking is the wisdom to unify skills. There's a breakdown of skills, and after a breakdown of behaviors or morality. So this modern disease is schizophrenia. I'm different according to different contexts. In this secularity, the Church has no overall influence on evolution. It is refused to the Church. So in fact, the crisis of transmission or passing down is a political issue in its noble meaning. There are two intrinsic factors for the evolution of political regimes. First, an artificial organization, which is not between time and spiritual, or temporal and spiritual, but between religion and politics. So this means that is excluding everything that is not neutral outside the political field, and we have this notion of a false secularization. We had that experience in France last year on the debate for marriage for all. The text that was proposed was prefaced by a statement of the reasons or motives. There were two lies, one threat, and that's a lot for a 1 page and a half document. So the first lie said that marriage had for a long time the monopoly of the Catholic Church, and that's false. But at the same time, there was a warning that the Catholic Church in its time had its time and had not to intervene in the debate. That was a way to exclude the Catholic Church, and that's the field of false secularization, excluding everything that is not neutral. The second lie was saying that most French people were favorable to marriage between people, same gender marriage. It's false. They didn't verify. They refused States General on this. They refused the debate in society. They supposed the agreement of the French people. And along the months, and thanks to some resolutions, that was a lie. And then there was also a threat. Conclusion to those two lies. It was said at the end that there is a new evolution which is desirable. I say that's a trend because when we are talking about a new desirable evolution, it means that there will be others. So the threat was in the reasons, in the statement of reasons. And fourthly, the terrible conclusion or confession. The current bill opens up access to marriage, marriage for all, and opens the door to adoption. So this shift in a kinship or parents. So the confession that you become parent through the mechanics of adoption and the negation of what is the most human aspect in a couple. So that's only an example, but it illustrates the context. This mindset about neutrality of false secularization targets the policy about everything is human. It is characterized also by a movement towards equal level, to a level of the differences. And so it negates what we have received. So Christians in politics are not comfortable. But that's not that serious, because it was observed that societies leaving Christianity are more threatened than the church itself. And then, because the mission is not to save political systems, all challenges that we face have something in common. In fact, they are challenges about morality. All our human actions are positions towards the truth and the good. But the moral reality is the political answer to the vocation of Christians, and there's no difference between public life and private life. But we have to be careful not to become moralistic. And the first question which is asked, is there a Christian family? I believe that we have to say, rather, that the family is not a code anymore. It's an interpretation framework that maintains all the key questions. Family, Christian family. It's not a journey. It's that has been traveled, but it's a journey to be traveled. So we have to intervene in society. We have to be a witness of hope in a secular and a secular state. And we have to be convinced ourselves that we have to defend causes that make the society grow. And defending interests make society smaller. Power is corrupt because we prefer today to enjoy power rather than exercising power. What happens in front of us is that when the political level doesn't decide anymore, the judge decide. And the legislator, the political people, they have to be called upon by morale and philosophy. And politics need to have some modesty in its intervention. But it has to recognize the role of family first. In demography, there's a desert in demography right now, and also in education, and then at the strict political level, because family is the last wall against all powers, and also the economy. Family was a place of production. Now it is a place of saving and consumption. So it's an economic subject. The social aspect in the expression of solidarity and also spiritual. All this justifies some thought and intervention by political people through laws that are expressing things, and also by public politics in the field of budget, housing, health. And lastly, by the what is expressed, the discourse that creates an environment, a culture. Last year's debates forced us to think. We have to think again today on individualism and capitalism. This is why in France there was an agreement through the members of parliament, a parliamentary agreement on different people sharing the same moral beliefs on the role of family. So what can we do? First, we should not deny the facts. There's a crisis in families, and for each family, we need to go ahead with families. What we heard from Gillian yesterday on the education of children is so motivating that we would like to take the time and go ahead with a family in that way. And there's also happiness and joy. I think that too often, maybe, from Gaudium et Spes, we remember hope so we can also incarnate joy, hope and joy. Two basic documents and reference documents are the Letters to Families by John Paul II and the Joy of Gospel. We need the contribution of Benedict XVI, but I talked about it a lot, and he continues to write. I would like to give you first the experience of the French family associations, and also I'll make a short presentation on what is being done in Europe. The French AFC associations in France have two main characteristics. First, it has existed for more than one century. It was born in 1905 when the right of associations was re-established in France. It was forbidden for a long time by Revolution and Republic. And at that time, France was undergoing industrialization. In many places, spontaneously, men, women used this possibility of creating associations to create family associations with this feeling that the evolution of society would lead to an individualization of rights at the detriment of families. Now, after one century of existence, spontaneous generation proves that the idea was good because many people were thinking about it at the same time. A philosopher said that there's nothing more powerful than an idea that is timely, and the power of this gut feeling was confirmed over time, adapting, of course, to different events, and also meetings for many of them were on the themes of education, which is the very reason of families. So over time, this movement was structured, organized, and gave itself some structure in departments and at the national level. With this specific aspect, the intuition or gut feeling came from the roots. If we create a family movement in France today, probably we would create a committee in Paris that would look for people or groups in the province. So the creation was the other way around. It exists and only through local associations. Today, there are 350 of them. Now, the second characteristic, we are a member of an institution, and that's very important. It is an idea from General de Gaulle when he had to rebuild the country after the Second World War. He was afraid of political parties. He wanted the French people to be directly represented in the state, which is the government and parliament, by people who were able to defend their interest in the two key aspects of their lives, which is workplace and family. In the workplace, de Gaulle gave an institutional power to representative unions, as they said, and they all of them have the mission to represent the workers in front of the public powers. So the story of unions is very well known because it is expanded to many other countries. So the story of the family movement is less well known. But de Gaulle wanted, in parallel, to give the same institutional power to family associations. But since he found associations that already were in the field, had been there for many years, there were no political difference between themselves. There was no ambition to take power, but just to serve families. So he proposed them to gather themselves in a union, which is called still today the National Union of Family Associations. And this union is the true parliament of families. It has an institutional power. And this is very important for us because, like any other institution in the Republic, they are at least partially funded by the state. And we have this great result. in a secular world like we have today, that the French state, through the law, funds part of the operating budget of Catholic family associations who have always shown their true identity. Now, the third characteristic of our movement, that it is called Catholic. Now, to be very clear, in the church organization in France, there is a difference between the church movements and the so-called movements in the church. The movement of churches are led by the clergy, and as a consequence, they commit the word of the church in a very special way. And also, there's a movement in the church, which is a movement of secular people choosing a field of action. They benefit from the support of the church, but they are not all by themselves, the word of the church, facing the word of the church. So this is where Catholic family associations are situation. Maybe they might not have the right to be called Catholic, since this name is for church movements, but still we were able to have that title with the reference for the social teaching of Catholic Church, telling the ecclesial authorities our positions will always be inspired by the social teaching of Catholic Church, and the only filter is that, but would not intervene on behalf of the church, even if the witnessing of our beliefs is also a way of influencing politics. So these are the three characteristics. They allow us today to be a spokesperson, quote unquote, that is recognized by the state. During the events of last year, there were huge demonstrations, and the state didn't understand seeing this raise of the population, and there was a trend also, or a will to try and understand a little bit better, to control it, and they tried through our associations. And during these events, I had the opportunity to meet the minister, just because we asked it, because we are recognized as a member of the institution, so we can meet, discuss, and inform, educate the minister about the determination of families. So this is a history of our movement. There are 350 local associations now, distributed in all the country. These associations and 35,000 member families with many users and friends. So these families act within these family associations in two fields. First, the support and services offered to families locally, and second field in the political sphere. Of course, large part of the family policy is within the hand of the most local authorities. A large part of the family politics comes under the municipalities, whether it is about housing, transportation, but also sports and nature, environment, urban development. It all has influence on families' life. Now, in the field of support, for 20 years now, we, seeing the difficulty of this mission and families facing education, we have created what is called education project. These education projects, as it is said, these are not places of education, but some work sites where education is done. These are work sites, gathering people in the same local environment on a regular basis to think together about the problems in their children's education, to hear, discuss, exchange, benefit from each one's experience under the authority of a moderator. They're not teachers in education, but they are people trained in the church social education and also in leading meetings and exchanges.
And you don't leave a sitting or a session of a worksite without making a concrete decision that everyone can do about their children. So now that we've understood very well that the issue of family is based on the couple first and foremost, this is the type of understanding that we have to take ownership of the unity of the couple. Let they be one. That's why he will leave his father and mother, and they will be only one flesh. Did we really understand that unity? When I hear about the distribution of family tasks, I'm a bit frightened. I get a bit scared, because if they're one, when one does something, the other one does it at the same time with him in connivance, in communion, in cooperation. And the good balance of this unity of the couple is not in the division of tasks. It's in the lived love on a daily basis. So this is so clear that we started these couple work sites. And to do that, we use the play written by John Paul II before he was Pope. It's called The Jeweler's Shop. We took the risk of making a video out of that play because, of course, Karol Wojtyla was Polish. He wrote a play on the rhapsodic style, and it's not very simple. And since I've seen this play in various venues, we realized that we were a little bit removed from attention to the text. It's a difficult text. We were distracted by the staging effects that are natural by the stage managers, of course. But here we created a video where we recorded essentially with a zoom, a close-up, the actors who speak. If you remember that play, it presents three situations. The silversmith's shop, and it says a lot about human relations and relations in a couple. The first situation is a couple that remains united despite separation. The man is dead, the husband is dead, but his wife remains in full communion with him and lives all her life with this absent father. The second situation is that of a couple who is disunited, not united, despite the fact that they're together, so they live on their own side. They no longer want the unity. And the third situation, and that's where the Pope's teaching lies, of course, the third is the son of the first couple and the daughter of the second couple, and they're wondering with anguish, what will happen of us? What will happen with us? And based on that play, now we're trying to propose this reflection process about the idea of the couple, and we offer that reflection to several families. The interest of a video is that we can cut a certain number of clips and go in more depth and show it to all kinds of different audiences. I spoke about what we're doing in the political arena, in the political field. Of course, it's broadening now to the dimension of the European institutions, and I will spend the rest of this presentation showing you what we're doing now as part of the Federation of Catholic Family Associations in Europe. This Federation of Catholic Family Associations, which we created some 15 years ago, and it brings together today 15 member countries. So there's still 12. We have to get 12 more, and now 13 with Croatia, but Croatia is already one of the 15. We have two reasons to defend, promote, and support the family. The first reason is freedom, Because it is in the family that each person is free to be who they are. That is the only place. You can look for it anywhere you want. The first remembrance we all have of a new birth shows very well that this little human, when he is welcomed in his family, is free to become who he is. And as an opposite, all the other members of the family adjust, resituate themselves to make all the room required to this new one who remains a mystery for everyone and who is free. Free, not free for everything. He's free for something. He's free for love. The second reason is that family is an institution that predates the state. The world is given to each and every one of us, and it is our duty to act in favor of the common good. If we consider, as Thomas Aquinas said, that what we call society is an order among men to realize together a common work towards a common goal, well, then the family, which is the basic cell of this organism, cannot be ignored or set aside by the way when we think about our common future. No society can forget the family when it thinks about its future. In society, the common purpose that all follow voluntarily and freely orients activities and orders them. Family has an essential role in society. When we talk about common purposes, it goes through family, which is the educator of men, a school of peace, a school for the good life, a way of life for each and every one, whatever our history, our experience, or our family situation. Family is a subject of law and not an object to administer. It is John Paul II who said first all of that in a very clear way in his letter to families that he planned already in 1980. Prophetically, he had seen that he saw that the family was endangered. He saw a movement that was starting to affect the reality of the family. He made it not first a moral issue, but he observed a social and cultural revolution. And this is why he published in November 1981 Familiales Consortio, to give you the context. And as a result of Proposal 42 of the Synod, a text was born on the rights of families. This resulted in the publication a few years later of this Charter of the Rights of the Family, which asserts in 11 points the inviolable rights of the family, subjects of law, and not objects to administer. It is the families who must ensure that the laws and institutions of the state not only do not injure the rights of the family, but even positively support and protect them. And this is what Familiales Consortio says here. In order to do that, families must be ever more aware that they are the actors of what we call the family policy, and that they should take on the responsibility of transforming society. And the last piece, which we often forget. If they don't, they will be the first victims of the evils that they just were content to observe with indifference. That's the situation we're in. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights doesn't speak very differently. We think that only Christians can assert some fundamental things about the precedence of the family, but the Universal Declaration of Human Rights also says the same thing. The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. In the Charter of the Rights of the Family, published by the Vatican, Article 6 says, the family has the right to exist and to progress as a family. The French Constitution said, the 1948 Constitution said, the state guarantees to the individual and to the family the means for their development. Even these secular texts are aware of this primacy of the family. Therefore, families have to take seriously their role in society by witnessing and by taking their responsibilities as a political and social subject. There should be no state monopoly for the family. The politicization of family is very dangerous. And we see that the temptation today, after a politicization of family, becomes a danger of setting aside the family, because it is this last rampart, this last defense against power. The ambition we have is, first and foremost, to bear witness to the family based on marriage as the only element for the integral development of society. Only element for the integral development of society. Our conviction is that the marriage-based families remain. The reason why the Church doesn't recognize divorce is there. It is because the family remains whatever happens. It's there when there is a marriage, and the children are evidence of that immutability. The family doesn't disappear. It's not extinguished, whatever the behaviors of the various members. It is the only element for the integral development of each and every one of us and of society. So the family is called upon to contribute to the common good because it is very deeply a place of life sharing and communion between spouses and communion with their children. The first article of the Charter of Rights of the Family of the Holy See says that the institutional value of marriage must be supported by public powers. Marriage is an institution that deserves to be protected and promoted in its unitive and durable dimensions. I'm talking here, of course, about civil marriages too. And we can certainly observe that the human, psychological, social, and economic costs of the decomposition of families are extremely high. The price to pay for the failures of families is considerable for the whole society. And when the family can no longer accomplish its tasks because for one reason or another it's stopped believing in its prophetic mission, then the state has to offset that loss. The family based on marriage between a man and a woman deserves to be recognized as the best form to protect the common life, both for the spouses as well as for the children. Here, I would like to make a short digression about the organization of our political powers. We're living in all our modern countries under the dual regime of democracy and the republic. But we no longer respect the hierarchy of these values. The republic is above democracy. Why? Because democracy is the law of the most powerful one. The one who has made the largest numbers of followers becomes the stronger and consequently imposes its law. The republic, the Republican Constitution, on the opposite, states a certain number of principles that are fundamental, as long-lasting as they are universal, as much as possible, to protect the weakest members. And that's why marriage, civil marriage, has always been by itself considered as an institution by the state and accordingly protected by Constitution. The civil marriage is an institution. You can see that with a couple of very clear signs. I suppose there are the same signs in your country as the ones we have in France. First characteristic of civil marriage, it is public. And the proof that it is public is that during marriage, you leave the door of the city hall open during a marriage, during a wedding. The second characteristic is that it commits the whole society in during a civil marriage. In France, the mayor has to ask to the people present, I remind you that the door is wide open. If someone is opposed to this marriage, please say it now. That makes of civil marriage not a contractual relationship, but an institutional relationship that engages and commits society as a whole. And why is there this institution put in the Constitution? Unfortunately, not enough anchored in the Constitution for us in France. It is because this institution protects the weakest. And who's the weaker in this institution? It's not the couple, the man and woman. It's the woman-child couple. The marriage has a mission to protect the woman and the child, and that's why it deserves to be in the Constitution. Unfortunately, when the French Constitution was drafted, they didn't feel the need to say that marriage was the union of a man and a woman. They didn't feel it was necessary to say so because it went without saying, because it was so much part of the customs that you didn't need to write it down. So, the day when people wanted to change the sense of marriage, they went through democracy and not through the republic. Entrapped in democracy, as I said earlier, and unfortunately, since we had loaded democracy, we thought we had that protection. But when we came to the constitutional judge to challenge this law on the marriage for all, we were answered, "Sorry for you. True, we forgot. But nothing says in the Constitution that marriage is the union of a man and a woman. Sorry." So now we have not only to support ourselves on law and even the constitutional law because it is no longer protecting us. And by the way, the French Constitution nowadays seems to be out of breath, exhausted, because in many respects, it no longer protects the French against the excesses of democracy. The family based on the marriage between a man and a woman deserves to be considered as the form that protects the best common life and to be distinguished from other forms of union, both for the spouses and the children. Preventive measures, including the prevention of the separations through a preparation for living together, through a real, relational, effective, and sexual education. Marriage preparation and support of couples, those are the actions that would complement the family policy to achieve a stable society based on family. An international survey, a global youth survey, was conducted in 11 countries in the world. It was published in May of last year. The survey showed that 62% of young people between 16 and 29 years of age state that society has become too individualistic, and this is the fault of policies. Today's policies are seen as being short-sighted and not paying enough attention to the long-term perspectives. And what the young people are telling us is that their dreams and aspirations are focusing on another field, the private field, and the small community of the closed ones, which is the family. But without any specific and precise definition of marriage based on the union of a man and a woman, no family policy can have any results. As long as the political decision makers don't define the object of their action, it becomes ineffective. That's why we have to choose the legal instrument with which we want to promote family and join to the argument of the family all the natural, financial, and economic advantages by applying the principle of duration. These policies obstruct the policies. We have to ask a question publicly. What is the additional cost imposed on society because of this lack of respect for the family? Supporting the parents in their missions as the first and main educators of their children. I'll move very quickly on that topic because a lot of things were said yesterday. But I just want to show you that it's already stated in certain texts that we have to require the implementation. Article 5 of the Charter of the Rights of the Family of the Vatican. Because they have given life to their children, the parents have the original first and inalienable rights of educating them. That's why they must be recognized as being the first and main educators of their children. Compare that with the Article 5 of the Charter of the Rights of the Family. Since they have conferred life on their children, parents have the original, primary, and inalienable right to educate them. So what would be a good policy for families in the 21st century? We have to work for a down-to-earth policy, a concrete policy, because man is worth more through what he is than from what he has. Familiales Consortio highlights the fact that no country in the world, no political system can think about its own future otherwise than through the image of the new generations, which, following their parents, will assume the multiform patrimony of values, duties, and aspirations of the nation to which they belong, at the same time as the heritage of the whole human family. Article 8 of the Charter of the Rights of the Family. The family has the right to exercise its social and political function in the construction of society. Article 9 of the Charter of the Rights of the Family. Families have the right to be able to rely on an adequate family policy on the part of public authorities in the juridical, economic, social, and fiscal domains without any discrimination whatsoever. Prophetically, the Pope has been using here a word that has become very much trendy these days: discrimination. First and foremost, we have to listen to families, to their real needs, particularly through the family associations that are supposed to represent them. Civil society plays a very important role and allows for a proximity with the families by playing the role of an intermediate body. We should better integrate the family associations in a dialogue with the social partners when we speak about a balance between family life and professional life. Similarly, we should highlight the fact that there are diversities of associations and we should not have families represented by a monopoly. Article 10 of the Charter of the Rights of the Family. Families have a right to a social and economic order in which the organization of work permits the members to live together and does not hinder the unity, well-being, health, and the stability of the family, while offering also the possibility of wholesome recreation. The family has the vocation to develop in dignity. This dignity is based both on the respect for the family and for its living conditions. A basic element is full employment. It is good that a family should feed its members from the fruits of its own work rather than from an allowance. And that justifies a use of employment policies and fiscal policies that fully developed favorable conditions for families. Unfortunately, our institutions, the European institutions, which accept the principle and the projects of founding a family and welcoming children, they always look at that under an angle of costs and benefits. And it's this false evaluation which explains the ineffective nature of policies. Nobody starts a family for money reasons, profit reasons, or a person is not identified only through the professional task that they accomplish or the tax that they pay. The family obeys to other factors: love, confidence, trust, attachment, confidence, trust. These terms don't appear in any European or directive or national law. Europe has refrained from any family policy because it intends to respect the principle of subsidiarity and considers this is the role of each state or nation. But it has eliminated all reference to the family in all its fundamental texts. That decision now relies on the shoulders of the different states and nations. There is an inversion and a lack of understanding of subsidiarity, which is such that in such a way, in a certain way, Europe gives itself all the powers and redistributes it as it sees fit to each of the states. The paradox shows the importance of recognizing the input of families into society in economic terms and compensate families for the investment that they make in the education of their children. To get out of the crisis, we have to take into account this so-called invisible work of the family has to be done through a social, political, and economic recognition. There's an interesting study by the OECD about invisible work. It shows that about 40% of the added value in a society is done invisibly and not accounted for. But we have to think also about the various forms of recognition to see how we could take into account this invisible work without removing from it this gratuitous, this free nature, this voluntary nature. Voluntary gift and gratuity in giving is fundamental for our civilization. Freely giving. So what else can we do? There are things that cannot be defined in market values. You can't pay for love. Love, peace, confidence, friendship, mutual assistance are things present in the individual and collective conscience that we aspire to. For the integral development is the only one that can guarantee the respect and dignity of all, requires both material and intangible conditions to be achieved. If we want to take into account these two dimensions, we can build a Europe where human dignity is respected, where citizens look towards the future with confidence. So there I will compensate by presenting the rest of my presentation in English, and the interpreters will have to take a rest because the first part of the text was not written. Our federation is launching a campaign for the European elections that will elect the members of the European Parliament in May 2014. The campaign, the platform will be unveiled by our association in all 28 member countries, and the families will be invited to take part in the campaign. The aim is to help families identify family-friendly candidates and to encourage families to vote for them. We have a big problem of voting in these elections. 61% of electors don't participate in the European elections. And we also want to invite the candidates to commit themselves to promote family-friendly policies if elected. So we'll publish a manifesto. We have published a manifesto with a questionnaire and with a commitment for the deputies to the European Parliament. members of the European Parliament, which you can find on the site that you see here on the screen. And it's www.voteforfamily2014.eu. We'll submit this to all the candidates with the idea of delaying a little bit the publication of results to maintain the suspense and not run the risk that this initiative will be supported only by anti-Europe parties or very, very polarized politically.
We will create for this shock impact and use the candidates that are very well committed on this topic. Michel said it yesterday. After a professional career in industry, a lengthy commitment in associations I believe deeply in the youth movements and scouts, and it naturally led me to participate when I was requested to participate in a family association. Baden Powell said, "Scout movement is growing in family life," so that it went without saying for me. And when I thought about it, and encouraged by the message of the three successive popes for the commitment of Christians in associations, I encouraged many people. I said, well, we have to get involved in politics. We have, and then I answered the question, well, why not me? So despite the concern we all have to be committed in politics, I noticed that it is a real concern for everyone, because within an association and profession, I was always encouraged by my family, my friends, and all those I knew. And when I said, the day I said, well, now it's not enough to advise political people through associations, because at the end of the day, they are the one to decide. So we have to replace them. And when I said, well, I'll try this adventure myself too. So immediately I saw the look of people who were not in agreement, because the separation between society and family, between politics and the rest of our concerns, between spiritual and temporal, between church and state, this separation is such that when you try to go ahead in that adventure, people think that you might have personal agendas. Politics is so much criticized that people, people who see you in politics think that you will get your hands dirty in that place. So that's part of our manifesto, to recommend and to ask the question, are you ready to go ahead, hands-on, to compromise yourself? And I think the question is sufficiently serious, and the creed is difficult enough. I've tried this adventure, and we'll see. There's one thing, by the way, I was really worried about before deciding to go ahead in that type of adventure, is that I have difficulty to admit that part of the rest of my personal history will be related to the opinion of others. It's not the way I see things, but you have to get along, because that's the rule of the game. So I tried to be a candidate on an initiative many people took with Christine Boutin. She was a minister, and for the last 30 years, she fought on the topics of life and family and life, and she has her personal story very often criticized, but she's very faithful in her serious commitments, and she keeps going, and she's very determined along that path. And she has a very sincere belief and faith, and like any other political people, it's a profession now for her, and hopefully it will not happen to me. But given my age, it will not. So we took this initiative Michel talked about yesterday. It's force vie, the strength of life. It's a label, a force vie, as I said yesterday. This French and English life, it doesn't mean much for you. But what I mean by force vie, it's just a branding, a slogan. It's just to say something. It's a title that identifies ourselves. And this title that I have chosen with Christine Boutin and Justin Martinez says, we want to be a force at the service of life. Life is our force or strength. So that's what it means, this label. It's not about a party. It's not an organization. It is precisely beyond political parties. We criticize their attitudes towards the European institutions, especially the parliaments, where they use the funds, and elected people have a lot of economic, financial means to assume their functions. And the political parties in French use this money given by the European government to fund their national political actions. This is a reason why Europe is completely down. We see it through the events in Ukraine, and there's an urgency, and only Mr. Obama, and we cannot say that he's directly impacted, but in Europe no one can represent the French people to stand up and say and what we can propose and build with the Russian people. In conclusion to my presentation, and I'll use a line by Charles Péguy, we don't have hope if we did not receive happiness. And the happiness we can communicate is the one coming from God. So Christian families will be witness of hope if they have at the heart this happiness coming from God. Christians will be the people of happiness. And these are the two fundamental texts, the letters to families and the happiness or joy of gospel, to announce happiness and joy even in crisis, and to soothe a crisis with consolation, as Pope Francis says, but also with the hope of a joy, as today is waiting for the final plenitude, that of the new wine we will drink in the realm of God, where all crisis will be soothed. So this conclusion, it comes from a consultant I heard in a professional environment. He was a consultant in organization. After 3 days of seminars and explained the difficulties of societies facing a growth to adapt their own organization. And it was it was brilliant, very interesting. And at the conclusion, he told participants, well, I'll just check if you understood well. Can you give me, according to you, what is the best example of an international organization that is the leaniest in the field of development? So but nobody knows, and we said, well, General Electric, such a bank, and he said, no, it's a Catholic Church. Just one command, one vision. Love one another. The three hierarchies, Pope, Bishop, and the faithful. No evolution. With this simplicity, development, global development, continuous growth, 2,000 years of history. So that's our hope. Thank you very much.